On the day the Johnson family went bankrupt, Michael Wilson brought me home. For 10 years, his affection made me the most dazzling princess in the capital, until that day, when he came home drunk and we had a night of madness. I confessed my long-buried love, but he misunderstood it as a scheme to trap him, scolding me for being shameless, and then announced his engagement to his first love. Everyone thought I would cause a scene, but this time I chose to silently terminate my pregnancy and quietly leave on the day of their wedding. The day I found out I was pregnant, I received Michael Wilson's wedding invitation. The golden letters on the cover pierced my heart. I crumpled the pregnancy test report and threw it in the trash. But as I turned, I heard a delicate voice say, "Michael, don't touch that. It's not good for the little one to see." I froze, unable to turn around, but through the reflection in the glass, I saw Michael Wilson and Sophia Baker walking in hand. The suit he wore was one I had helped him choose, and my heart ached, nearly bringing me to tears. In the past, the name Michael belonged only to me and him. He is the heir of the Wilson family. Everyone calls him Mr. Wilson, but I'm not afraid of him. When we first met, I didn't want to call him Uncle Michael, let alone Mr. Wilson. I knew he was 8 years older than me, but I just wanted to call him by his name, Michael. At that time, everyone thought Michael Wilson would be angry, but he just smiled and pinched my cheek. As long as Emily likes it, it can be called anything. I thought we would only have a few brief encounters, but an unexpected incident made me lose my parents, and the Johnson family went bankrupt as well. Those relatives who once affectionately called me Emily suddenly turned into strangers, brandishing some dubious bills to try to pressure me. In my most desperate moment, Michael Wilson burst into the Johnson family and protected me. He said, "Emily, don't be afraid. I'll take you home." From that moment on, I was no longer the young lady of the Johnson family, but rather Michael Wilson's most cherished treasure. He was always gloomy and serious, but he decorated my bedroom in pink for me. Knowing I was afraid to be alone, he connected 2 rooms, leaving a slightly ajar door to make me feel safe. He adorned my room with jewelry and fine clothes, and with tenderness and love, he supported my world. However, all the beauty came to a sudden halt that night. When he was drunk, he gave me a wonderful experience that led me to a dream. But when I woke up, his cold gaze and ruthless words shattered all my fantasies. "Emily Johnson, how could I raise such a shameless girl? You really disappoint me." He had someone block that door. He proposed to Sophia Baker. Over the years, he did many things for me. The only thing missing was what I had always wanted, a proper wedding. At that moment, I realized he didn't want to marry, he just didn't love me. Since then, I was no longer the proud mistress of this villa. Sophia Baker ruined the flowers I planted and smashed the swing Michael Wilson made for me. On sleepless, fearful nights, I had intimate conversations with Michael Wilson. That night, I called my great-uncle Johnson, who lives overseas, and agreed to inherit his estate. "Emily Johnson, I don't have much time left. I regret standing by and watching Johnson family. I don't expect you to forgive me, nor do I hope you will take care of my old age," he said. "I just hope that after I pass away, you can manage this family business well. I will be leaving because there is nothing here that I'm attached to anymore." At first, I was reluctant to part with Michael Wilson and didn't want to leave. However, now I had become a burden to him and could only choose to go. I wanted to say a proper goodbye before leaving, but seeing him and Sophia Baker together, I couldn't utter a word. Just as I was about to go back to my room to pack, Michael Wilson called out to me. I was a bit surprised because he hadn't spoken to me proactively in a long time. "Emily Johnson, Sophia hopes you can be a bridesmaid at our wedding." It turned out it was for Sophia Baker. I gave a bitter smile and said, "All right, Uncle Michael." It was the first time I called Michael Wilson that, and he seemed a bit uncomfortable. Just as he was about to say something, Sophia Baker interrupted, "Not a bridesmaid, but a flower girl. Our Emily Johnson is still a little kid. A flower girl in her 20s is quite ridiculous." Michael Wilson would never have allowed anyone to treat me this way before. However, this time, he just looked at me with an expression that left no room for refusal. I numbly nodded, but my gaze unconsciously fell on Michael Wilson's ring. It was a ring I had made by hand a few years ago, engraved with mountains and raindrops. I never expected he was still wearing it. Back then, I naively believed had feelings for me. He put aside a $1 billion contract to take care of me when I was sick. He would get jealous and pinch my face when he saw me talking to other boys. He kept saying to me, "Emily, will you stay by my side forever? I will give you the best." Michael Wilson noticed my gaze, frowned slightly, and without hesitation, took off the ring and threw it into the trash can. I was worried he would see the pregnancy test report in the trash, and in a moment of panic, I instinctively called him by his familiar name, Michael. Michael Wilson's expression instantly turned dark. Emily Johnson, watch your identity. All right, don't argue with the child. Sophia Baker playfully tugged at Michael Wilson's arm and gave him a kiss. The coldness in Michael Wilson's eyes immediately melted away, and when he looked at her, it was all gentleness. This is the tenderness I once briefly possessed, only to lose it completely overnight. I realized that some feelings can only be hidden deep within. Once expressed, everything will be lost. After comforting Michael Wilson, Sophia Baker smiled at me and said, "Hey kid, come shopping with us later. Michael said you have a good eye. He used to have you help him choose his clothes and shoes. Can you help us pick out wedding supplies this time?" I was just a lonely girl living under someone else's roof with no right to refuse the matriarch of the Wilson family, so I could only nod in agreement. Sophia Baker didn't like the driver interrupting, insisting that Michael Wilson drive himself. The independent Michael Wilson was completely obedient to her. When getting in the car, Michael Wilson skillfully opened the passenger door, and this time it was Sophia Baker who sat down. The safety charm I had embroidered for Michael Wilson was now replaced with a new couple's keychain. She was not very pleased with this and insisted on putting a sticker for her exclusive seat on the passenger side. Michael Wilson chuckled and said, "Immature." Hearing this made my feelings quite complicated, and I turned to look at the scenery rushing past outside the window. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed in my ears. There had been a car accident. My forehead hit the front seat hard, and I felt intense pain in my abdomen. Just as I was about to raise my head to call for help, I saw Michael Wilson tightly protecting Sophia Baker. He held her and calmly made a call to handle the aftermath. I finally crawled out from the back seat, and he noticed me with some surprise. "My stomach hurts so much," I said. Sophia Baker poked her head out from Michael Wilson's arms and asked, "Why do you always look for reasons to get his attention whenever you see me getting close to Michael? Can't you accept us?" In the past, whenever I was slightly injured, Michael Wilson would patiently comfort me for a long time. He would apply medicine for me, feed me candy, and tell jokes to make me happy. This time, however, he looked at me with disgust, drenched in cold sweat. "Emily Johnson, how long are you going to keep this up?" "I'm not." My voice grew weaker. Until I got on the ambulance, Michael Wilson didn't look at me again. My forehead was swollen, and my arm was cut by glass and stitched up with 3 stitches. Pregnant women cannot receive anesthesia, and the doctor looked at me nervously, but I seemed to feel no pain. A child who is not loved always has to learn to be understanding. Seeing that I was sad, the doctor comforted me, saying, "Fortunately, the baby is fine. Can you help me schedule a DC procedure? Aren't you planning to keep it?" The doctor looked at me in confusion. "You were cradling your belly when you were brought into the hospital," I thought. In a daze, I saw the past Michael Wilson sitting by my bedside, tears of worry in his eyes. At that moment, I instinctively wanted to protect our child. But back in reality, I clearly knew that both this child and I were a disgrace to Michael Wilson. We shouldn't exist. The doctor told me that my current physical condition wasn't suitable for surgery and that I needed 2 days of rest. After being discharged, I took a detour to get my visa, and by the time I returned to the Wilson family, it was already late. I thought Michael Wilson would take Sophia Baker to see the fireworks, but unexpectedly, he was waiting on the sofa for me to come home. "Why are you back so late?" There were a lot of people at the hospital. I habitually looked down to hide my lie, and this time I actually got away with it. "I saved you some food. After you eat, call Sophia to apologize." I didn't know what I did wrong, but since he asked me to apologize, I had no choice but to comply. I sat at the dining table, which was filled with spicy dishes that Sophia Baker liked. I forced myself to eat a few bites, but the spiciness made me tear up. Michael Wilson seemed very dissatisfied with how I was. He suddenly stood up angry. "Emily Johnson, who are you trying to impress? Can't you just take it easy on a happy day?" I gripped the chopsticks tightly, tears streaming down my face, and ate a few bites of rice in a daze. Michael Wilson silently watched me. He threw the expensive scar cream he once bought in front of me and said, "The Wilson family doesn't need you to eat this meal. Hurry up and clean yourself up. Don't embarrass yourself at the wedding." I wanted to tell Michael Wilson that I would never embarrass him again. In a few days, I would disappear from his world forever. But before I could say anything, he had already walked away. I cleaned up the dining table and washed the dishes. Then I quietly returned to my room to pack my things. Everything belonging to the Wilson family no longer belonged to me. I only took the little dress I wore when I first arrived. Michael Wilson once said this dress was very meaningful and even had it framed to display prominently. Sophia Baker arrived, and this dress along with that secret love was carelessly tossed into a forgotten corner. After tidying up, I lay on the bed checking the flight information. Ambiguous sounds came from next door, and I covered my head with the blanket. The brightness of the screen hurt my eyes. I know the Wilson family has been very good to me. Michael Wilson gave me the best 10 years of my life. To repay their kindness, I should leave early and not make things difficult for him. But I just want to greedily catch a glimpse of Michael Wilson as the groom to see if he matches my imagination. Consider it a farewell to my 10 years of secret admiration. From now on, I only hope he can be happy and forget my existence. Early the next morning, Sophia Baker brought me a dress. I'm sorry you got hurt. The day after tomorrow is your birthday, and to make up for it, I asked Michael to throw a celebration for you. Remember to dress up nicely. Michael doesn't want to see you looking gloomy. I glanced at the white dress and found that the material and cut were much worse than in previous years. In the past, the Wilson family's birthdays were significant events for me. Michael Wilson would always put aside his work to prepare for me personally. But now, I shouldn't ask for too much. Thank you, Aunt Sophie. Sophia Baker left, satisfied. On my birthday, I tried hard to cheer myself up, dressing up carefully, and putting on the earrings my mother designed. There was originally a matching necklace, but it disappeared after the Johnson family went bankrupt. Michael Wilson once said he would do everything possible to help me find it. A noisy commotion came from downstairs. Most of the guests had arrived. I couldn't afford to delay, so I hurried down the stairs, lifting my skirt. Halfway down, I froze. This wasn't my birthday party. It was the engagement party of Michael Wilson and Sophia Baker. Sophia Baker was wearing the same dress as mine, with a dazzling necklace around her neck. The guests at the scene were staring at me with strange looks. Hey, isn't she the adopted daughter of the Wilson family? Mr. and Mrs. Wilson treat her so well, yet she provocatively wears the same dress on such an important occasion. How shameless. She's always been so arrogant. Look at her earrings. They must be stolen. Luckily, Mrs. Wilson has a soft heart. Those who once praised me now stood by Sophia Baker's side. I felt ashamed. My face flushed. I wanted to explain, but tripped over my skirt and fell in front of everyone. Amid the mockery, Michael Wilson quickly approached me, and I thought he was going to help me up. He took off his jacket and threw it in my face. Take off the dress and get lost. My ankle hurt badly and I couldn't get up right away. His outstretched hand quickly withdrew, and he whispered, Emily Johnson, my patience is limited. He chose to stand by Sophia Baker, and arguing was pointless. I could only grit my teeth and get up, limping back to my room. The music from downstairs began to play, and I turned to see Michael Wilson and Sophia Baker dancing together. It was I who taught him to dance. Back then, he wasn't very good at it. I held back my tears and slammed the door shut, isolating myself from the noise. I thought it would hurt as usual, but looking at the bright moonlight outside, I felt unexpectedly calm. When I first arrived at the Wilson family, I couldn't sleep well every night. Michael Wilson went to great lengths to plant a large patch of lavender behind my room. At night, the moonlight and the scent of flowers made me feel at ease. But now, the moonlight remains while my heart is as desolate as that flower bed. The evening breeze passed by, seemingly without any ripples. When morning came, I went to the hospital by myself. It was the same doctor who treated my foot injury. After checking my body, he scheduled an afternoon DC procedure for me. I was sitting outside the operating room waiting when I received a call from Michael Wilson. He asked with concern, I heard from Mrs. Thompson that you went to the hospital. Is your injury still not healed? I replied, last night it was Sophia Baker. He interrupted, I know. Michael Wilson interrupted me. She is the future Mrs. Wilson and your elder. I must protect her. I was taken aback. The Michael Wilson who once stood up to the world for me now left me feeling lost. In that moment, I realized that apart from money, I seemed to owe him nothing anymore. At least emotionally, he was the one who made me suffer first. I forced a smile and touched my belly. Can you come to the hospital to see me? After all, Michael Wilson was the father of this child. Out of emotion and reason, I wanted to say goodbye to him. Michael Wilson hesitated for a moment and said, I'll come over after this meeting. After hanging up the phone, I leaned back in my chair, staring blankly at the ceiling. Time passed slowly, and it wasn't until the nurse came to urge me that I snapped back to reality. I wanted to send Michael Wilson a message to ask where he was. When I opened my phone, I saw a new post from Sophia Baker, spent the whole day shopping with me, thinks even a diamond ring the size of a pigeon egg is too small. He wishes he could give me the best of everything in the world. I stopped expecting anything and liked the post before following the nurse into the operating room. The surgery went smoothly. In a few days, I would quietly leave Michael Wilson's world, just like this child. The Wilson family was busy preparing for the wedding, caught up in a whirlwind of activities. Knew no one wanted to see me, so I obediently stayed in my room to recover. The wedding day was bustling with excitement. Michael Wilson took a moment from his busy schedule to come to my door and locked it. "Emily Johnson, I'm doing this for your own good," he said. "This way, Sophia can feel at ease." We looked at each other through a locked door. Through the crack, I vaguely saw Michael Wilson in his wedding attire. The gray suit made him appear dignified and stern, but not quite as I had imagined. I smiled and said, "Michael Wilson, I wish you happiness. It doesn't matter who you're with as long as you're happy." I will quietly leave and never show up again. Everyone in the Wilson family was invited to this grand wedding, yet I was locked in this unnoticed room. When the surroundings calmed down, I shattered the glass. I left the place I had lived for 10 years without any hesitation, boarding the plane without any attachments. Just as the plane was about to take off, the person next to me mentioned some shocking news. Michael Wilson had run away from his wedding. I heard he made a call just before the wedding, but no one answered. He panicked immediately. He was desperate to go home and check things out. Mrs. Wilson was not pleased and stopped him. "After a few arguments, Mr. Wilson actually just left the bride and drove away." Both the person next to me and I were shocked. Michael Wilson had always been the heir of the Wilson family since he was young, reserved, and rarely showed his emotions. How could he do something like this on such an important day? Could it be for me? The moment that thought crossed my mind, I dismissed it. What am I to him? A sister or a daughter? Are you a lover or a mistress? I have nothing. She's just worried that I might cause trouble at the wedding. I stopped thinking about it, put on the blindfold, and leaned back in the chair to sleep. It's been a long time since I've had a good sleep. I dreamt of many past events. In my earlier years, I relied on Michael Wilson's affection and often ignored the rules of the Wilson family, sneaking out to have fun at night. One time, Michael Wilson woke up in the middle of the night and couldn't find me, nearly crying out of worry. When I apologized to him, he held me tightly and said, "It's okay, Emily, just as long as you come back." Back then, no matter how much trouble I caused, he always supported me unconditionally. But this time is different. I won't go back. He should be happy. Without me as a burden, he can have a good life with Sophia Baker. After waking this time, everything with Michael Wilson is behind me. We'll live our own lives from now on, and the barrier between us is no longer that door, but an insurmountable ocean. We will never see each other again. After getting off the plane, Great Uncle Johnson's butler came to pick me up. He looked apologetic and said, "MS. Johnson, the sir asked me to apologize to you on his behalf before he passed." MS. Johnson, I haven't heard that title in a long time. Since coming to the Wilson family, Michael Wilson specifically asked the staff to omit that surname when addressing me, hoping to eliminate the distance in my heart and bring us closer together. At that time, how could we have imagined that one day we would become the most familiar strangers because we drew a line between us? Uncle Lee, the butler, saw my melancholic expression and thought I was still upset about the Johnson family past. He sighed gently and said, "Sir, you haven't been able to let go of this knot in your heart all these years." He said he shouldn't have stayed out of it when the Johnson family incident happened. Some things in this world are far more important than money. For the sake of momentary pride, he lost the most important thing in his life and regretted it until his death. I replied lightly, "It's all in the past now. It's meaningless to be entangled in past choices. One must always look forward. Uncle Lee, take me to pay respects to Great Uncle Johnson. I have something else I need your help with. The Wilson family has done me a favor. That favor has already been repaid. Let's settle it with money. I know Michael Wilson doesn't care about this money. I simply don't want to owe him anything. Once the favor is settled, I can completely let him go." Uncle Lee took me to familiarize myself with the various properties left by Great Uncle Johnson. His business was substantial, involving many industries, and he even had considerable dealings with the Wilson Corporation. While reviewing documents, I saw Michael Wilson's name on a contract. These 3 words hold significant meaning for me. In the past years, this name appeared on my exam papers and on countless checks. It once gave me everything. Unfortunately, I didn't pay attention at that time. I was distracted for 3 seconds, then got back to my busy work. Just as I was settling in, my assistant came in without knocking. "Ms. Johnson, this document needs your signature." I put down my pen and frowned at him. He silently lowered his head and said, "I'm sorry, I won't disturb you while you're working next time." "There won't be a next time, just leave." I continued to flip through the documents, and as I rubbed my wrist, I suddenly thought about my earlier action. It really resembled Michael Wilson. I realized I couldn't completely forget him. Because I am the rose he personally nurtured, every part of me reveals a shadow. We have long merged into one, inseparable. I looked up at the window. It should be evening back home now. What is Michael Wilson doing? Would he remember the 10 years we lived together because of a habitual gesture? I thought for a moment, then shook my head and smiled. That's all in the past. Why think of him again? Although some things are hard to forget, I've already let go. I'm busy every day, constantly in meetings and dealing with paperwork. The entire weight of the company is on my shoulders, leaving me no time to reminisce about the past. That day, the new assistant informed me that an important client was coming for a meeting. I didn't ask much and was taken to the conference room. As soon as I walked in, I saw that familiar face. He was bathed in bright sunlight, but his face looked gloomy. "Mr. Wilson, this is our new Miss Johnson. Don't let her youth fool you. She is very decisive and truly has the charm you had when you were young." Michael Wilson remained silent, his gaze fixed on me. "Emily, long time no see." I was taken aback. He actually came and called me Emily. However, I quickly realized that this meeting was probably just a coincidence. To Michael Wilson, career has always been the most important thing. I forced a smile that was both gracious and somewhat distant. "Hello, Mr. Wilson." Michael Wilson's eyes slightly widened, his tone filled with disbelief. "What did you just call me?" Initially, I called him Michael because of his favoritism, hiding my feelings. Later, I faced reality and referred to him as Uncle Michael, drawing a line. My love for him ended that night, and my feelings for him stopped at his wedding. Now, we are just business partners. I should call him Mr. Wilson. I can only call him Mr. Wilson. So Mr. Wilson and Ms. Johnson have a good relationship. That's great. About this contract. The assistant noticed the awkwardness between us and smiled to ease the tension. But Michael Wilson was unfazed and suddenly asked, "Was that 200 million project something you gave to me? Why would you do that?" I smiled and said, "That's what I owe you. From now on, we're even." Michael Wilson, upon hearing this, suddenly tore the contract on the table to shreds, almost gritting his teeth as he said, "Do you think you can just sever ties with me like this? 10 years. How will you repay that time?" Michael Wilson's outburst shocked everyone in the conference room. The assistant nervously looked at me. I asked everyone to leave, leaving just the 2 of us in the room. At that moment, I suddenly felt a strong aura of sadness surrounding Michael Wilson. He looked at me helplessly and said, "Emily, I've been looking for you for a long time." I didn't respond. I just quietly made him a cup of tea, as I used to when he was troubled. Michael Wilson took the teacup, his hand slightly trembling. "The wedding is cancelled." I looked at him in surprise. He lowered his head and said, "I regret it." That day, my heart was racing, and I suddenly had a bad premonition. I remember when you were a mischievous child, accidentally locking yourself in the basement and being scared for days. I suddenly realized that I shouldn't have locked you up. You're most afraid of being alone. I called you, and when you didn't answer, I immediately regretted it. I was worried something would happen to you, and even more afraid that you'd have bad thoughts. Michael Wilson lowered his head and took a sip of tea, his eyes reddening. "I never expected you to leave. The moment I pushed the door and didn't see you, I felt like my world had collapsed. I had no mood to do anything. I just kept searching for you. Someone said they saw you overseas, and at first I didn't believe it, but I came to check anyway, and unexpectedly, you were really here." Michael Wilson is good at hiding his emotions, but this time he failed. I could feel his sadness, but I didn't understand why he was so hurt. "Mr. Wilson, I've grown up now, and you have your own family. We should both start new lives. After discussing business, Mr. Wilson, you should go back early, it's your honeymoon, and you should spend more time with Mrs. Wilson. Michael Wilson suddenly retorted, she isn't. After saying that, he realized it was inappropriate, turned his head, and stopped looking at me. After a long time, he slowly said, that brooch was my planned birthday gift for you. Sophia Baker said she liked it and wanted to borrow it for a day, so I agreed. On the wedding day, I placed your brooch at your door, thinking you would see it as soon as you stepped out, but unexpectedly, that door cut off everything between us. For the past 10 years, whenever Michael Wilson made me angry, I would sulk and hide in my room, avoiding him. To make me happy, he would leave various small gifts at my door, like cakes, cookies, and jewelry. As long as I opened the door to accept them, it was a signal that I was willing to reconcile. I never thought that one day, that door would no longer open for him. Emily, come home with me. The situation at home hasn't changed. As long as you come back, I missed her. Wilson, everything is different now. I won't be going back. I slowly stood up. If Mr. Wilson isn't here to discuss business today, then there's no need to continue. I have a lot to do. See you next time. At that moment, Michael Wilson suddenly grabbed my hand. The scar on my arm was exposed. A flash of pain crossed his eyes as he gently let go of my hand and said firmly, we will meet again. Emily, one day you will come back to me. I turned and left without looking back, just as he did to me back then. Michael Wilson started appearing in front of me frequently, finding various excuses. Sometimes, we wouldn't say a word to each other all day. I sat at my desk working while he busied himself on the sofa across from me. Suddenly, he said, Emily, I feel like we're back in the Wilson family. You were still young back then, and you'd be sad if you couldn't see me. Every time I worked in the study, I would let you read and draw at the little table next to me. It seems like we've switched places now. I looked up at Michael Wilson, who had a somewhat sad expression. To be honest, I can't remember many things from the past. I once held on to our memories. But what was the point? He wanted to forget me, trying hard to diminish our past. I could only choose to ignore those things. It's getting late. I have to go to a meeting. Mr. Wilson, please make yourself comfortable. Michael Wilson stood up with me, about to say something, when the office door suddenly burst open and Sophia Baker walked in. She looked at me in surprise and then burst into laughter. So it really is you. I just wanted to know what kind of woman could make him so infatuated, and the result is you. Sophia Baker raised her voice, almost screaming, I am his wife. I am Mrs. Wilson. What are you? Why is your life so good? As an orphan, why does Michael Wilson pamper you so much? Why can't I be like you? She angrily threw her bag at me, and Michael Wilson quickly stepped in front of me, grabbing Sophia Baker's wrist. You're nothing. We didn't get a license, and we didn't complete the wedding. You're nothing. Sophia Baker burst into tears, raising the diamond ring in her hand. Then what does this count as? We said at the time it was just a business marriage. No. Sophia Baker broke down crying, wanting to leave, but she wouldn't let me go, pointing at me and asking Michael Wilson, do you really like her that much? I felt helpless and couldn't help but respond. Don't you feel disgusted by this? You're her Uncle Michael. Don't think I don't know. You're with me just to replace her. I don't like red dresses, and I don't like lavender. Those are all things she likes. I only like you. Since you've chosen self-deception, why not continue? I looked at Michael Wilson in shock. He responded to everything with silence. I gave a self-deprecating smile. Does he love me? How could that be? What about all the humiliation and neglect I've endured? Perhaps my questioning was too obvious, and Michael Wilson slowly began to speak. Emily, I've been struggling with my feelings. Later, I found out that it was Sophia Baker who drugged me that night. I couldn't tell you the truth, afraid of losing you and also afraid of what others would think. I'm not as strong as you imagine. Emily, you're so young. If I were your age, I would pursue you without hesitation, but I'm no longer young. I have responsibilities and a life. My identity and status hold me back, so I can only keep you by my side in another way. I slapped Michael Wilson, yet my heart calmed down. Mr. Wilson, from now on, I really owe you nothing. Emily. I'm sorry. I just ask that you don't hate me. I looked into his deep and sorrowful eyes. Once, I wanted to immerse myself in your deep gaze, wanting to be with you for a lifetime. However, now tears have formed a sea that separates us. We are destined to be apart on either shore. I don't hate you. I just want to leave you to forget you. Michael Wilson's body swayed slightly, Emily. Michael Wilson. Sophia Baker, unable to contain her emotions, cried and laughed as she said, "Don't be fooled by her.
She isn't as good as you think."
She appears pure and innocent, but she's been through a lot. She got pregnant, but didn't dare to let anyone know and secretly went abroad to deal with it. She doesn't deserve your love. Only I truly love you. Michael Wilson was shocked, breathing heavily, suddenly spitting out a mouthful of blood, half kneeling on the ground, and confusedly asked, "Why didn't you tell me?" He raised his head, tears washing away the blood at the corner of his mouth. Struggling to suppress his emotions, his voice still revealed sadness. "That day you asked me to go to the hospital with you, it was actually, Emily, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I really didn't know." I gently pushed away the hand that was gripping the corner of my clothes. This hand, which had accompanied me for 10 years, had once saved me from despair and now pushed me toward darkness. It's all in the past. You should go back. I need to move forward. I'm no longer that child who followed Michael Wilson around. I've grown up, built my own career, and can live independently. The adult world always keeps a distance. After years of knowing each other, Michael Wilson and I understand each other well. When he pushed me away for his pride and face, when he hurt me again and again, just for Sophia Baker, I understood that I would never go back to him. After that day, Michael Wilson left with Sophia Baker, leaving behind only that brooch and earrings. The bloodstains in the office were quickly cleaned up, and all past memories vanished without a trace. My collaboration with Wilson Corporation continued as usual, but I never saw Michael Wilson again. Later, I heard that Sophia Baker had gone mad and was sent to a mental hospital, and that talented, arrogant Michael Wilson inexplicably turned great overnight. Afterward, I thrived with Johnson Corporation and met a cheerful young man. His love for me was unabashed, as if he wanted to tell the world about it. We were together for 3 years, and he proposed to me with a beautiful diamond ring. On the wedding day, a white-haired old man appeared briefly before me, but the sunlight was too strong for me to see his face clearly. However, that no longer mattered. I had found someone to spend my life with. In the life that followed, I would be happy and fulfilled, with no ties to him.